Firstly, welcome to this afternoon's session. The hard thing about being, I guess, the first session after lunch is that in a dark room with dark kind of things is that you just don't know what the energy is like. So what we're going to do is, we're going to make sure that this is as interactive as possible. The pictures that you see at the table, you're going to be using that in about, in a few minutes. But as Arun said, that this session is about redefining the role of talent acquisition in the fourth industrial revolution. And this is probably something that you've heard, for a number of years now, which a book by Professor Klaus Schwab was actually introduced. So he is the co-founder and co-executive chairman for the World Economic Forum. But what's interesting is that if you look at the timeline that, that I've actually posted out there, this was actually from 2016. So this was a World Economic Forum kind of picture illustration that shows you, what is the impact industries and the business models when it comes to, what that revolution is. And lo and behold, at 2019, going into 2020, is that we're actually seeing a lot of those things happen even a year in advance, right? So the reason I thought, we thought that this afternoon's session is quite relevant is that fourth industrial revolution is actually happening now. So it's no longer just the future, but it's happening now. We recognize that for, the way we talk about it, though, is that it's still to come because there are a lot of articles and research that talks about, by 2030, over 7 million jobs will be eliminated, but 7.2 million will be new jobs that doesn't even exist today. So it's all about 10 years from now. But the reality is a lot of those are actually happening right now, and it's just accelerating. If you look at Singapore, right, there's a research that actually talks about that by 2020, 60% of companies and what they do here in Singapore will be automated. And that is across, across function. If you look at it as far as GDP impact from an Asia perspective, a little bit closer to, to Singapore is India. So by 2020, 60% of India's GDP will be attributed to AI and automation as far as contributing to that economy. And it is, a very big economy when it comes to, to the rest of Asia. So the promise of audience participation for now is you will see pictures at the table there. So we're just going to do a little bit of an icebreaker. Think about the role or the function that you're in today from a talent acquisition or if you're an HR perspective. Pick a picture that resonates around how you're thinking about your role today and your role over the next 3 years. Because this is really about, how you're going to change it and, how you need to think about it. So we'll give you 30 seconds to pick a picture. Let me know. Okay, pick a picture that resonates with you and how you think about your role. Is that not enough? Just one picture. As an individual, so pick one each. Sorry. Pick one each. That wasn't a very good instruction. So pick one each. And if you're not at a table, join a table. So, all right. Okay. For the next 5 minutes, 45 seconds each, can you share within your table, right, why you picked that picture as far as how you're thinking about your role today and over the next couple of years? If you just joined us, pick a picture and then share at the table why you picked that picture as far as how you're thinking about your role or your function today and over the next couple of years. Another minute. Okay. So has everybody gone around the table? Yeah, everybody's done it. Fantastic. So keep that image next to you, because what we're going to do is before the end of the session is you'll do another check-in to see if you still feel the same way, as far as how are you thinking about your role, your function today and over the next couple of years. So here's an HR tech at a glance infographics, which was about 6 or 7 months ago, and so it's probably outdated. So show of hands, if you know 10 or more HR tech or have implemented 10 or more HR tech that's actually that's being shown there. None? Okay. 5 or more technology, so there's, 5 or more. 3 or more? Keep your hands up if you're, okay. All right, that's fine. That's good. Look, the reason why I wanted to show you this is that there's a reason why there's a lot of HR technologies that have come into the market and continuing to do so, right? And what I want to be able to take you through before I bring in, subject matter experts who have, practical examples of how they've done it and are still going through it, is that there's a reason for that, and I'm going to take you through over the next 3 or 4 slides as to why, at least from the point of view of how we're seeing things from pymetrics. First and foremost is that there's and in each of those is really there to help elevate the talent acquisition or the HR function by really automating a number of the processes that have been in silos today. Second is also to elevate the role of talent acquisition and the role of HR and the broader scheme as far as at a board level or at a leadership team level. And again, we'll go through that. So pymetrics is basically in that little box under candidate screening and vetting, and that's how we really came about. But then again is our purpose as far as why we're here and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to help clients is that our ultimate goal is, imagine if every person that is actually in the workforce is in a role and is a company that they're really happy to be with, and they're really are enjoying the job that they're doing. And our goal is that to really achieve that, not just for your first job or their first job, but it's really about how do you provide that transparency and fairness that here's the other roles that you could potentially go to within the company because we want you to stay here. And so I'm not going to go into the deep dive of what is pymetrics, but we are what you call a gamified assessment. We come from not a technology perspective. We come, our heritage is actually cognitive neuroscience. So we take on board all the cognitive, emotional, social traits that have been used in the neuroscience field and overlaid that with technology. And then just put that in the world of HR to see if it's something that could drive value when it comes to from efficiency right through to, hey, can we actually bridge the gap on what's required as far as the roles that are, that companies and government needs today versus the ones that actually, you're going to need as far as the future. And if you look at again, I'm taking a lot of stuff from the World Economic Forum because Davos was only a couple of weeks ago. So from a talent acquisition perspective, right, look at the difference as far as the top skills that were in demand in 2015 versus in 2020. how much of that is really like not the hard skills versus the soft skills? And if you look at the, on the other side is, what are the job families that are in decline versus on the rise? So I talk about, 5 or 7 years ago, the title of data scientist was very limited, and that was still up and coming. There were a lot of business analysts and technical analysts, but data scientists was not, wasn't there. Today, data scientist is like the new black, right? Everybody wants a data scientist. And again, in HR, the data and insights capabilities is just increasing when it comes to into investments. And the reason, again, is why you have all these technologies now in HR is that it is now, talent is a strategic imperative at the board level. And I'm going to talk about the 3 areas of what we're seeing as far as the trend when it comes to talent. One is, you've already seen that there's a lot of HR technologies out there. And there's a reinvestment that I'm seeing, and all of you are in the room here to really understand, how do I evaluate, what does this mean when it comes to the function or the role that I have today? But it's, in the last couple of years, it has moved from just being efficient to really being about how do I be measured? How do I make sure that I can have a conversation around, return on investment and the business impact? How do I move my role from the talent acquisition of today, which is, a lot of it is really about, a mode that hasn't actually evolved in the last few decades. It's still about CV screening and spending 6 seconds a minute going through 5,000 CVs. And is that really, what a talent acquisition person really wants to do today and moving forward, right? So it's moving just not from an efficiency perspective then, is by using technology, and as you take them through the funnel and into the business, is you can now measure, like, are you bringing in the right talent? And so that's one from an HR tech perspective. So the move is from process to really, outcome-based. But there's also a lot of, because there's a lot of AI-based technologies out there, there's also some key considerations. So what we're seeing is there isn't a global, a global body right now that looks at how do you monitor AI in the workplace. But there is one government body that other companies or other government tend to look to, and that is the US EEOC, so the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, right? Because they're the ones that have the most rigid frameworks and guidelines on how do you make sure that even with technology that you don't have adverse impact. The great thing about that is, as a vendor, we work very closely with the US EEOC, and they help guide us as far as our roadmap. We're also making sure that we're a thought partner to government. So yesterday, I spent half the day with the team, talking to PDPC, because the Singapore government has come out with an AI ethics committee with a subcommittee around fairness. And what they wanted was a public consultation on what is that point of view, and we definitely have a point of view. And then how are other companies in Singapore actually using that in a fair, explainable, and transparent manner? And so you'll be seeing that as a guideline coming out from the Singapore government. A couple of months ago, we did the exact same thing with the Australian Human Rights Commissioner, right? So they're going to be coming out with their framework in the next couple of months, and we are having those ongoing conversations. And so what you'll see is a lot more guidelines, especially when you talk about people and technology within the workplace. Second piece is huge investments when it comes to HR analytics. So recognizing that all of those are potentially point technologies today, underpinning that, it really is about how is this technology giving you the right data and the right insights to have a different conversation with your organization. If I were to look at my experience, I've been in the IT industry for many years. I was actually there when EDI first came on board, right? So the way I see it is that there's a reason why there is a reinvestment or an investment in HR now, because the rest of your organization has embraced or embracing digital, right? So in the late 90s, it was about, ERP so that finance and supply chain and operations can be democratized. In the 2000s, right? That was the year of basically Siebel and Salesforce, so that the sales organization, needed to basically have a center, a source of truth when it comes to how they can have a more predictable business. When I was a CMO in Australia for Microsoft, I was there when I can no longer just invest on a target segment or a target audience. I now, because of digital, I cannot spend $1 without really understanding the data and the insights that, that I can deliver, for the business when it comes to lead generation, demand generation. And now we're at the cusp of, it's HR's turn, right? It's HR's turn to be elevated and to be at that table. And to be at that table is that you've got to have the data and the insights in addition to the instinct that, you've had, over the years. Because that, the instinct is about the experience, but now it's about that data that you need to leverage. And what's driving that whole thing is about the future of work, which is really the talent of tomorrow. And if you look at some of the trends around that and it's not just happening, in the US or in EMEA, if you look at some of the data sets that are here, is what you call the gig economy. These are the professional contract workers. That is actually getting bigger and bigger in Asia. I think in Australia it's getting close to 50%, right? As a startup, my PR / marketing person is actually a fantastic contract worker, but she used to run PR for Yahoo, right? Global PR. But now she's kind of saying, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to go back to Australia, but I'm going to pick and choose what projects and what companies I'm going to work with, right? And so we're seeing that as a trend. So as a talent acquisition or an HR function is, how do you think about that? Unilever talks about the boundaries of employees are actually changing. And so when you want to innovate, right, so it's not just about your own employees anymore, they're partnering with their ecosystem of partners in which their partners are actually going into their company or vice versa. And it's not like a part-time thing. It's about, for the next year, you are going to work within this organization, but you're actually you're still a Unilever employee. And, how do you ideate and innovate, from that perspective? Now, I've been talking about technology, and to me it's not just about technology. Technology is there so that you could augment the human capability, right? So when you're thinking about technologies, think about that you are in the people business. And so how will technology help elevate the function and the team that you have today? And so, because part of that is about change management, and Michelle's going to come up a little bit later around to share with you about her experience on that. Because at the end of the day, it's building a new muscle, and what is the impact to the individuals within HR, within TA, and how do you encourage them that this is actually a good thing, because it is going to elevate, it is going to transform them. But it's not just TA and it's not just HR, is who else is impacted, because hiring managers have been used to doing certain things, right? They've referred this person that they've known for the last 20 years, and they are perfect for that role in that, in your company. So how do you, work with that change to say, yes, that's fantastic, and let's make sure that we have a data-driven way as well of making a decision. At the end of the day, it's still a decision. But let's not just balance it with pure instinct. Let's have a data-driven, a more scalable way of doing that. But that takes change, and your teams need to be equipped to be able to have that conversation, right? And so again I call it that, it is change management, that is not just about technology. It is about people, culture, and technology. It used to be people, process, and technology, but I think with the change, with the multi-generation workforce that are out there in Asia, it's a much younger workforce. Culture is a new structure. It really does have an impact when you embrace, technology. So don't forget about, how are you going to bring, the people in your teams, and how are you going to bring yourself into that journey. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'll be inviting Michelle Hancic and Ben Roberts shortly, but I just want to close off by saying that, look, embrace HR tech in your role transformation. It is about changing mindset, and think about it as a function, as a team, as an individual. But make sure that you're looking at it that you're in the people business, and people have to be at the center. That is helping. That is being helped by technology. And as I said, I've been there when it was finance's turn, sales and marketing, and it's now HR and TA's turn, and I think it's a great time to be in the HR and the TA function. So with that, if I can get Ben and Michelle to come up and join me, actually I'll get one of you to sit here. And what we're going to do is, before I open it up for questions, is both Ben and Michelle, have practical examples that they can share with you. They're subject matter experts in their own field. So what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to get Michelle to talk, a little bit about herself, her background, and what she's seeing in the market, and then we'll do the same thing for Ben, who again is, less than 12 months in role at Essence, but have been able to drive transformation. It is still ongoing, and he can share that with you. So with that, Michelle, I'm gonna give you get you a bit of an intro.
For sure, absolutely. Hello everyone and welcome. So my background is that I'm an organisational psychologist, and for my whole career I've pretty much focused in the talent acquisition space. So I started off doing the hard yards in agency recruitment, high volume recruitment, contact centre, branch staff, you name it, and I felt a little bit like Groundhog Day at times, but also did that in Australia and in the UK. And then the last 14 years was spent working at the ANZ Bank in Australia. So there I was responsible for worked in a number of HR roles, but most notably worked in the talent acquisition space. So I looked after the ANZ graduate program for a number of years, looked after career support services, which was the internal mobility function within the bank to support people going through business change and displacement. And most recently I was the head of assessment, so responsible for all of the psychometric assessment for talent acquisition globally at ANZ. And about 3 years ago, I actually brought pymetrics into ANZ, and that's where I first met Grace. And so when the opportunity came up to join pymetrics, I thought, this sounds interesting. I might jump the fence. And so I've been with pymetrics since October. So that's
She
me.
believed in us so much that she decided to join the company.
I drank the Kool-Aid, absolutely. Excellent. So there are a few things that I guess I just wanted to cover in terms of my experience. Most recently, one of the key projects that I really worked on was supporting the massive business transformation that was going on at ANZ around moving to scaled agile. And I was supporting the teams there around designing the assessment processes to support that transformation. Previously, business change was done really with having leaders sit around a table and, discuss their people and determine, which people should go into which roles. But given the nature of the transformation and the cultural change, we decided to actually implement an assessment-based approach and really very much a data-driven approach to make those decisions. So I will draw on that experience in what I'm about to talk about, as well as my experience in working with clients and with other organisations as well. So the first thing I wanted to talk about when we think about change in mindset is really around what I'm calling, I guess, the new age of competencies. So if we think about competency frameworks, they're really the cornerstone of what we do in HR, right? One of the first things that, as an assessment, head of assessment, I would talk to my business about is, okay, what competencies are required for your roles? What are the knowledge, skills and abilities, the KSAs, the classic sort of framework you would have all, learnt at university that are required for the roles. And what we're starting to see now is, despite some talk around, competencies are dead or are they still alive or what should we do, what I'm sort of seeing is certainly this is the new age of competencies. We're seeing a collective shift away from relying heavily on knowledge and skills in our selection processes, because what we're finding is with all of the changes that Grace has talked about in terms of the new world of work, is that knowledge and skills are going to be quite limited, because many of the knowledge and skills that we need actually don't quite exist yet. So we need to think about the precursors to those and really focus our efforts on the abilities or the soft skills or the capabilities or the traits, whatever you want to call it. So things like creativity, for example, and interpersonal relationship building, etc. And so what we're seeing now is with the advent of a range of new and innovative assessment technologies that we are using data to actually check ourselves, right? So competencies are often built off a framework of, talking to individuals within the business to understand, what are the key capabilities required. But actually what we're finding is that when we use data to back that up, it actually often challenges us, because competencies sometimes can be subjective and they can also be aspirational. But the reality can be something that's quite different within your business. So I'm finding that to be quite a fascinating transformation, and really see that as the new age of competencies. When it comes to a data-driven mindset, if I think about the business transformation that I went through, as well as the recruitment function that we were transforming at the same time, it was really thinking about we were creating roles that no one had ever really heard of. They came from the Agile framework. We were looking at hiring people into journey experts, Scrum masters, etc., which was completely foreign to a banking environment. And so we needed to be very mindful around what are the feeder roles? How do we help our people to understand how they translate their current skills and knowledge and their preferences and their traits into those future roles. So we did some quite extensive mapping work there to support them in that. The other thing I think that's really important is around the opportunity for reflection and helping people to really think about, well, what do I want to do? And Grace talked a little bit about the sense of purpose as well, and we're seeing roles come up in organisations such as Chief Purpose Officer, right? So thinking about people's individual motivations and giving them feedback to be able to actually self-reflect and self-select is really important. And then from a data-driven decisions perspective, so, as I mentioned earlier, when we're using data, we're able to actually really challenge leaders to think about the decisions they're making and to challenge their preconceived notions. So once again, when you're going through a business transformation and you're, working with people or having to select people who you've known for a very long time, you will have preconceived ideas, but the data can actually reveal some quite interesting inputs that what we found really made a much more objective, made for a much more objective decision-making process, which results in a greater degree of fairness. Okay. And then finally, in terms of supporting the change, so just some key, lessons that I've learnt along the way. First of all is, where are you going and why? And I think, most people, it's pretty classic, right, to communicate why is the change happening. But I think the key there is really about leading by example and making sure that, in TA or HR, that you're actually walking the talk and living by the values and following the, the new world. Aligned to their why really feeds into that sense of purpose, and there's actually quite a breadth of research now looking at the impact of aligning individual purpose to the organisation purpose, and Deloitte released some research indicating that where there is an alignment, there's a 30% higher rate of innovation, and there's also a 40% higher retention rate in those organisations where people are aligned. So there is certainly a significant impact to be had for the satisfaction of employees and for the success of your organisation. And then finally, what do they stand to lose if they don't change? So, people talk about change is hard, people resist, but one of the key reasons why people resist change is because they fear letting go of something that they value. And so when we talk about and when we think about, communicating change, it's absolutely around thinking about what are the things that will stay the same? So yes, there will be change, and these are the benefits of change, but what will stay the same? And what do we risk happening if we don't change? So what are some of the negative things that could happen if we stay the same? Because change is happening, as Grace, clearly articulated. It's happening to us whether we like it or not. But how do we help people on that journey, and how do we help them understand? So that's maybe.
Great. If you were to summarize it, the three areas that Michelle spoke about is this is the new age of competencies. It is data-driven from a decision-making perspective, and then supporting the change, which is giving you some examples. So just want to kind of hold that. What we're going to do is move to Ben. We'll ask a couple of questions, and we'll open it up to the audience. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Grace. So my name's Ben Roberts. I've worked in the talent space for about 15 years, and I've worked in Europe, I've worked in the Middle East, and now I've been in Asia for the last 4 years, based in Singapore. Predominantly I worked in the creative industries, but last year I made a change to a company called Essence. Essence is a digital media data-driven agency, and they've only been in Asia for 4.5 years, but we've been rapidly growing. And the opportunity was a very exciting one because it was a new role created, and so I lead all the HR and the talent acquisition. So it was a time to be able to build something and create something in an exciting space. We've got 9 offices in Asia so far, in 6 different markets, and we're growing more and more so. In 2018, we tripled the number of hires that we made compared to 2017. So it's a really good opportunity to start building a different function, looking at different things and technology to help aid us do that. So one of the things was to create a new talent acquisition function really at Essence. And to build a team, one of the key things is to have someone you trust, someone who's hungry and fast and curious and collaborative. So I found a lady called Nina DeVouge, who's here today. And alongside her, Nina and I built a different team that was there previously, because we didn't necessarily want people who had media background. We wanted people who knew how to do talent and build that in a different way, with them coming from different backgrounds, but all sharing the same traits and qualities. One of the things I really wanted to bring into Essence, being a digital-first, data-driven company, was pymetrics. And the reason why is we wanted candidates to have their first experience of us as a digital experience. Walk the talk, as they say. So we got pymetrics in for that very reason. And one of the things we also noticed was before we had pymetrics, we were getting thousands of applications, and the recruitment team was just spending their time screening. So that wasn't good for our business because we weren't being able to hunt, we weren't being able to drive the talent agenda in other parts of the business. So by having that funnel with pymetrics, we were really being able to identify the top talent who would suit the skill set and the qualities that we require at Essence. Also with the unconscious bias, it helps bring that diversity of talent and the diversity of thought that's really needed for us. Also, it created a lot of engagement internally. So the way pymetrics works is you have to have your internal people play the games first so they can understand how Essence behaviors and culture is. And we got a lot of good feedback from people doing that. So it showed to us that, they appreciated that talent was coming along on a journey as well and changing from just being a support function, but actually aligning themselves with the digital business. And for us, gamification is a huge tool. We hire a lot of millennials, so they've grown up playing games. So that is a really engaging way to stand out when there's so many different opportunities for these skill sets to go to have something like that. It's much better than just sending a CV into a database and hoping it gets somewhere. So it's been really good.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. What we're going to do is I've got a couple of questions for you that I think the team here is going to be interested. What I want to do, though, is just go back to Michelle, ask her a question, and we'll open it up. Right. Okay. Michelle, one of the things that you did, what you said was you led the assessments out there for ANZ, and a lot of the teams here are looking at all of those HR technology vendors. Could you share your own? What would be like the top 2 or 3 considerations that that one should really think about when you're evaluating vendors?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So before we chose Pymetrics, we did a massive market scan. We looked at a range of different vendors, and given that this technology was very new, we hadn't used AI assessment before, we had to really come up with a bit of a framework. And so these are sort of, for me, the top 3 categories. There's a lot of detail that sits behind it, and if anyone wants to chat to me afterwards, I'm happy to talk about it. I could talk about it all day. But the first one is really around self-reflection. So am I clear on what I need? What are my pain points? What am I trying to address? Am I just doing this because I feel like it's hype and I need to be involved and get involved? And that can be a reason, but is it the best reason? And I think, being really clear on why you need this to enable you to actually get the business endorsement is really important. From a vendor evaluation perspective, there are a whole range of criteria to think about in terms of, does the vendor meet my needs and expected standards? So does the science behind it stack up? Can they combat bias and support diversity? Is there ROI, and can I actually use it in my business? And then candidate experience and brand perception is really around, does the platform that I'm using provide a solid candidate experience and a really solid reflection of my brand as well, and the impression I want to give in the market.
Thank you, Michelle. I just got like that. We've got 0 time. However, is it okay if I just ask Ben a quick question? Because I think one of the things that I guess the audience here really wants to understand is, so you've implemented change within Essence. Can you give us a top line as to what's been the impact so far, and what are the things, some of the benefits that you've seen, and what do you get, the things that you're most proud of, if you can call it the top 3?
Well, I think being able to reduce the time of hire by 30% by using Pymetrics and having a quick, nimble team has allowed our talent acquisition team to be able to focus on things like a grad program, an internship program. We're holding an open house next week for 60 students. We're doing interview training for all the hiring managers. So to be able to come across the whole facets of the business instead of just recruitment is really making an impact and laying the foundations for the future of Essence in Asia.
And that transformation is still ongoing.
It will continuously be ongoing.
What's the next phase? So you're doing talent acquisition. What's next? What's around the corner?
We're always keeping our eyes out for more, so we'll see.
Wonderful. I promised you guys that we're going to open it up for questions, but I think we're out of time. What we'll do is we'll hang around outside. I think there's another session here. If you guys have any questions, my email is grace@pymetrics.com. I'll make sure to pass on your details to Michelle and to Ben if you've got any specific questions for them. I just want to say thank you so much, Michelle and Ben, and I hope that the audience here got value out of what we've shared, and reflect back on the picture that you've chosen. Would that still be the same picture that that you're thinking about based on what you've heard and what you've heard from today? So thank you.